HOA filled my well with concrete, so I froze their water contract with the city. Asterisk, you're not going to believe what my HOA did this time. I thought I'd seen it all, but then they took it way too far. Actually filled my well with concrete. Me back up. So I lived just outside city limits on a few acres of land I inherited from my grandfather. It's not flashy, but it's peaceful. We've always had our own private well, clean water, no monthly bill. Totally legal, fully inspected. And registered. My granddad dug that well himself. It served our family for decades. Then the HOA formed. Yep, some of the newer folks bought properties in the subdivision next door and decided they needed to bring order to the area. Even though my land isn't technically in the HOA boundaries, they kept trying to include me in their rules. Letters, fines, warnings, all of which I ignored. I'm not part of the HOA, and I made that very clear, but they just didn't let up. Their biggest issue? My well. They claimed it was unsightly and a hazard to community aesthetics. I explained that I don't even use the city water system. I'm self-reliant, off-grid for water, but they didn't care. They demanded I hook up to municipal water like everyone else. I refused. Legally, I don't have to. Then one morning, I came home from work and everything changed. I walk out back, and I see a crew not even from the city, just some hired contractors. They've sealed off the top of my well with concrete. No warning, no paperwork, no permission. Just a giant chunk of concrete sealing the well I've used for years. I was speechless. I asked them who sent them. They said the HOA president gave. The order said it was unauthorized utility infrastructure. I immediately called the sheriff. Turns out, because the HOA president told them I was a rogue resident damaging shared resources, contractors thought they were following official city orders. Wrong, and now it was personal. No water, no warning, and my land vandalized. But I wasn't going to yell or scream. I was going to outsmart them. Here's the thing. What the HOA didn't realize is that I work in municipal contracts and infrastructure planning. Specifically, I consult on water rights and distribution networks. In other words, I know how the system works better than they do. I pulled the HOA's water infrastructure records. Turns out, they had a conditional municipal water contract subject to review and tied directly to community compliance with public utility codes. And here's the juicy part. Their water connection was tied to a right-of-way easement that partially runs through my land. When I inherited the property, the easement remained. But guess what? The easement had a renewal clause on it. It hadn't been renewed in over a year. It was legally expired, meaning the HOA's water pipeline was technically running through my land. Without permission, so I filed a notice of termination of the expired easement and sent it to the city utilities office. I also attached photos of the concrete-filled well, a copy of the incident report from the sheriff, and a notarized affidavit explaining what happened. The city wasn't pleased. Not one bit by the end of the week. The city froze the HOA's water service pending review. That's right, the entire subdivision lost their water over the HOA stunt. Within 48 hours, my phone was blowing up. Angry voicemails from HOA board members. One of them even had the nerve to say I was endangering the community. I reminded them. They trespassed. They destroyed private property. They tampered with a registered water source. And worst of all, they made decisions without legal authority. The city backed me up. I offered to renegotiate the easement at a cost. Let's just say the HOA had to fork over a massive settlement to re-establish their right-of-way. And part of the deal had to pay for professional removal of the concrete and full restoration of my well at their expense. The HOA president ended up resigning. Turns out she'd greenlit the whole thing without legal advice, and it was all on record. Last I heard, she's being investigated for misappropriation of funds for paying the contractors. So now, my well is fully operational, better than ever. I have a notarized exemption from ever being forced into their HOA, and they have a monthly water surcharge with part of the funds going straight to me for land access and maintenance. They tried to concrete me into submission, and now I own their water connection. Sometimes The best revenge is knowing the system and letting karma flow like water asterisk. You'd think after all that the water shut off. The settlement, the public. Embarrassment, they'd learn their lesson, right? Wrong. A few weeks go by. Things seem quiet. My well's running, their water contract is on lease from me, and the HOA is licking its wounds. But one day, I get a knock on the door. It's a city inspector. He says he got a complaint that my water well is unsafe and a threat to the aquifer. I just laughed. I told him, let me guess, the HOA. He rolled his eyes and nodded. Said he gets calls like this from them every week. Still, he had to follow up. So I invited him in, walked him out to the well, and showed him all the updated infrastructure. Filtration, casing, legal certification, all by the book. He said this is one of the cleanest setups I've seen. And that's when I told him the full story about the concrete, the sabotage, contract freeze. He was stunned, turns out. The inspector had been assigned to that HOA before, and this wasn't their first rodeo. He told me the board had tried to do something similar to another homeowner over a chicken coop. That case? Still in litigation? I thanked him for his time, and he left with a warning. Don't let your guard down with them. They don't take. Losing well. He wasn't kidding. A few days later, I noticed a small work crew at the edge of my property. I walked down to check, and there they were, measuring the property line. I asked them what they were doing. One of them sheepishly said they were surveying for a new community walking trail right through my land. I laughed again audibly. I asked, you got a permit for that? They looked confused. So I whipped out my phone, showed them the legal parcel map, and said, that's private land. You step 1 foot past that marker, and you're trespassing. They packed up and left real fast. But I wasn't done. I called up the city zoning board and asked to revoke any future public use permits involving my property. I put up new boundary signage. I even installed trail cameras at key points. If they wanted a war of persistence, they picked the wrong guy. Then came the letter. The HOA sent me a formal invitation to attend a board meeting, something about reconsidering your participation in our community improvement initiative. I nearly spit my coffee laughing, so I showed up not as a neighbor, but as a legal landowner with leverage. They gave me the floor. I didn't rant, didn't raise my voice. I simply laid out the timeline, the illegal concrete sabotage, the frozen contract, the expired easement, the compensation agreement, and the multiple attempts at harassment since. Then I ended it with this. You don't have to like that I'm outside your control, but you will respect it, or I'll revoke your pipeline access permanently. Silence. Some of the residents in the room actually clapped. Turns out I wasn't the only one they'd tried to bully. Others had kept quiet until they saw me stand. Up by the next month, 3 board members resigned. A vote was held. The new board reached out personally to apologize and requested a long-term seizure. Water access agreement with a clause preventing future interference with my property. I agreed. For a hefty monthly fee now, every time they turn on their faucet, they're reminded whose water they're really using. Asterisk. New board, new contract, water flowing. Peace on my land for the first time in months. But you know what they say about snakes, you. Cut off one head, and 2 more grow back. It all started again when I got a letter in the mail. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the County Environmental Review Board. Apparently, there was a new concern filed regarding unauthorized pesticide runoff on my land. It claimed that chemicals from my yard were leaching into the community watershed. Now keep in mind, my land is downhill from the HOA. Downhill. Gravity 101. So I knew it was fake. Another attempt to harass me with bureaucracy. Probably trying to get my well declared a hazard so they could shut it down legally. But they underestimated 2 things. 1, I don't use chemicals. I maintain my land organically. My garden is certified pesticide-free. I compost. I test my soil twice a year. And 2, I've got documentation on everything. So I call the board, investigator, and invite them out. This poor guy shows up expecting to find barrels of toxic sludge. Instead, he finds chickens, a beehive, and me handing him a binder of tests. Results, dates, invoices, photos, you name it. He just laughs and says, "Someone really doesn't like you." I smile. They're not great at hiding it. Turns out the complaint had been filed anonymously, but after a little digging in, a nudge from my attorney friend, we found out it was filed by a member of the former HOA board. The one who signed the order to concrete my well. She was trying to claw back power, and it backfired hard. Not only was the complaint thrown out, but she got slapped with a $5,000 fine for filing a false environmental report. Herself as acting on behalf of the HOA, that fine went straight to the board's budget. You can imagine how well that went over with the residents. But I wasn't done, see? While they were busy trying to get my well shut down, I've been quietly doing some planning of my own. Sit on my porch, drink from my well, and smile knowing I turned a power-hungry HOA into my customer asterisk.